You got the brand inquiry, you're excited, you really want the job, but then the client asks that dreaded question, what's your rate? You might panic, you might make up a number and pull it out of thin air, but today we're gonna fix that. In this video, I'm gonna be walking you through exactly what you need to include within your commercial estimates so you can start closing better paying clients. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kayla and I'm a commercial photographer and the founder of the Sunroom School. This is part 3 of my commercial photography pricing series where I break down the pricing strategies you need to charge with confidence, create clear estimates, and just stop leaving money on the table. First off, what is an estimate? An estimate provides a clear picture of the all-in costs to produce a photo shoot or video production. This is something that you'll usually create custom for every single project, usually for mid to large size brands. This is a little bit different than, say, creating packages because packages are predetermined pricing versus an estimate is usually a custom quote created for each individual client and production. Every estimate that you create for a client must be approved by the client before you can actually start working together. And it's just that, it's an estimate. So if the scope changes, the estimate changes. Once you give that initial estimate, you're not necessarily locked into it. If there is overages or the number of deliverables increases, you can always go back. Usually you'll have this in writing on the estimate, and it will say that if the scope changes, the total cost of the estimate will also change. Now let's dive into the anatomy of a strong commercial estimate. These are the core line items you need in order to break down the production expenses. First, we have your creative fee. This is the cost you need in order to show up and do what you do best. Typically, this includes your time on set, but it's not necessarily an hourly rate because it also includes your overall creative expertise. So this creative fee number can really range based on their skill level, especially when you start looking at signed photographers who are repped by an agency. I've seen this number vary from $3,000 for a creative fee all the way up to $20,000 for the creative fee. The second line item you need to have in your estimate is licensing and usage rates. If you watch part 2 of this pricing series, you will have already learned the questions you need to ask in order to understand how to specify usage and have that conversation with your clients. But just to quickly go over it here, it is essentially the cost that you're attributing to the permission that you're giving to your client in order for them to use your imagery. And so this has 3 determining factors: the duration that they'll be able to use your imagery, the placements, and also the territories. Usually this is separated from your creative fee, but sometimes I'll see photographers combine the creative and the licensing fees into one line item just for simplicity's sake and to not kind of confuse the client. Sometimes it's better to present that to a client as an all-in-one creative/licensing fee together versus separating it out. So it kind of is depending on who you're actually speaking to. This is a non-negotiable for commercial work. Even when you're working with smaller brands, you really want to notate explicitly what your client has permission to use your images for. This essentially protects you in the case that the client wants to come back and use your imagery for something that you weren't aware of. And another important note is that you really want to have somewhere that if a client wants to use your imagery for anything not explicitly written, they will need to come back to you and ask for a separate quote. The third line item you need is the production and crew expenses. And now this is usually multiple line items because this encompasses a lot of the logistics of the production. That's why it's so important to really create these custom per client because no 2 photo shoots or productions are going to be the same. But this usually includes your crew like hair and makeup, styling, propping, gaffers, any team members that you need in order to create the production, as well as the location fees, any kit rentals, equipment rentals. This usually falls in this category. You also have separate line items for any prep work. I didn't mention this earlier, but as a photographer, you can also charge for your pre-production time. Of course, if there's pre-production expenses that you can bill for, you can also bill for post-production expenses. And so this is usually where retouching fees, color grading, sound design, video editing, this is where you can charge separately for the cost of each individual line item. And obviously as photographers, sometimes we just wrap that into our creative fee, but it's really important to know that in larger commercial jobs, you can charge separately for that because it's a whole separate job title. And oftentimes the post-production for really large photo shoots is often outsourced. So it's going to a separate person instead of the same person who's actually doing the shooting on the day of the shoot. Finally, you have your miscellaneous section. This usually covers all the extra add-on expenses that the team might incur in order to produce the production. And so this can include anything from travels, extra meals, insurance costs, anything additional that is necessary in order to produce the photo shoot. You can essentially bill to the client if it's essential and within reason, of course, but this will usually fall within the miscellaneous expenses. A key takeaway from this lesson is essentially everything is billable. And if it's required in order to create the photo shoot for the client, you can absolutely bill for that. A lot of times photographers, especially when we're coming into the industry, we assume we have to eat a lot of these expenses. And don't get me wrong, sometimes we really do, especially when it's a passion project or a client who doesn't have the biggest budget. We do have to eat some of these expenses at the beginning. But when you are working with substantial commercial clients, you absolutely can bill for every single thing within reason that it takes in order to produce the desired production. At the end of the day, when clients truly understand what they're paying for through estimates and creating clear line items, it really allows them to have a full picture of what they're actually investing in. They're able to understand the full transformation and the full value, and they're much more likely to book you and say yes. And don't worry if creating all of these estimates sounds overwhelming. I created the perfect tool for you. I'm so excited to introduce you to the rate calculator. This is essentially your AI-powered pricing assistant in your back pocket that will help you create these estimates for you, basically taking out all the guesswork and creating these estimates in minutes. This AI-powered tool is literally trained on my 7 years of experience and research within the commercial industry. So this will literally change your life. I have been using this tool to estimate a lot of my recent jobs, and I can proudly say it has booked me over $10,000 worth of client work and probably onwards to more at this point by the time you're watching this video. I use it for everything. I use it when I'm negotiating a client script, but you don't have to trust me. I will link it in the description below. I will also be offering an estimate template when you actually sign up to use the rate calculator. If you've ever sent a quote and feel like you were throwing spaghetti at the wall, trust me, I've been there. But once you start to understand how to properly structure your estimates, you're going to feel so much more confident in the way that you approach your business. Give this video a like if you learned something new, and subscribe, because in the next video, I'll be walking you through a real life client negotiation and estimate breakdown so you can see all of this in action. And depending on the time that you're watching this video, you can watch it right here.